last Thursday, December 7th, a Beechcraft Debonair crashed in southwestern Tennessee. On board were Jenny Blalock, who was the pilot, and her father, James. Now this one's a little strange because it was a beautiful VFR day, so I don't think weather was an issue. But I've kind of had a look at the ADS-B data, and there may be some hints in there as to what might have happened, but still, we don't really know anything. The investigation hasn't even probably started, so right now I'm just purely speculating. So if you look at the ADS-B data on ForeFlight, you can see they took off from Knoxville, climbed up to 6,500 feet. At that point, it looks like she put it on autopilot because the altitude hold is straight and level and the track is straight as an arrow. And then after about 15-20 minutes of this, all of a sudden you start getting some altitude and airspeed changes. Slowly at first, it almost looks like she took the altitude hold off and started hand flying it. But if you look at the track, it continues straight for the entirety of the flight. So it's unlikely that she would have just taken the altitude hold off. And the oscillations start off slow at first, but then they get a little bit more radical. It does kind of level out for a bit, but then after what looks like 40 minutes of dealing with this problem, we've got altitude changes of 1,000 feet and airspeed changes all over the place. You see that the airplane pitches up. It gets down to as low as 85 miles an hour on the ADS-B, and then noses over and plunges essentially straight into the ground. Their last vertical speed was over 6,000 feet a minute, and they were doing over 216 miles an hour. So what happened? Now, like I said, I'm purely guessing at this point right now. I'm not really going to get too carried away with what might happen. The NTSB will take a look at this. But there's really, in this kind of case, there's only a couple things it could be. Number one, pilot incapacitation. Possible that they got carbon monoxide poisoning and passed out. Unlikely, I think, kind of early or kind of a short flight for something like that. Then there's mechanical. I mean, like I said, it wasn't weather probably, so then it's probably mechanical. You could lose control of the aircraft if you lost elevator cables or the yoke got jammed somehow or another, and you were forced to then try and control the plane with just the trim wheel. That would kind of explain 40 minutes of gradual pitch and airspeed oscillations. But it also could be runaway trim, and I kind of leaning toward that, just again, purely guessing, but I watched one of her videos. She has a YouTube channel, TNflygirl, and on one of her latest videos, she referenced her autopilot was giving her trouble in altitude hold. She's saying, she even literally says, look, it's almost up to stall speed. And it's like, she's talking to her dad again. I told you. So she's obviously had trouble with this autopilot before. And the data kind of looks like that. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see what the NTSB comes up with. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about pitch change, runaway pitch, because I was going to make a video on it anyway, and now's as good a time as any, because it's one of those things that we think about once in a great while, but then kind of forget about, and it's kind of important. So when I first started ferrying airplanes, I was taught that the first thing you do when you get into a strange plane that you're going to fly is find the circuit breaker for the electric trim motor. Because if you have a runaway trim, you're going to have your hands full fighting the controls, trying to keep the plane either from diving into the ground or pitching up and stalling. You're going to be fighting it so much that you're not going to have time to look around for that circuit breaker and figure out which one it is. You need to know exactly where it is so you can get to it by feel and pull it without looking. Because you're pushing on that yoke for all you're worth. You can't stick your head down underneath there trying to read circuit breaker labels, that are etched into the plastic. You need to know it's the fourth one over or whatever. So that's really important. The other thing I was taught that if you have a runaway pitch, obviously the first thing you do is hit the trim switch. If it's got electric trim, it's possible that the trim got stuck in the last application you gave. If you were trimming it down and it doesn't stop going down, move it back and forth, see if you get it unstuck, kind of like a stuck mic. If that doesn't work, you hit the big red trim or autopilot disconnect button. That also works for the electric trim. But remember, on a lot of planes, it won't disengage the electric trim permanently. It just interrupts it. So once you take your thumb off the button, the electric trim will probably start going again. But it'll give you time to retrim the plane manually and maybe find that circuit breaker. And if all else fails, you don't know where the circuit breaker is, the big red button's not working, you're fighting the airplane and things are getting out of control, hit the master switch. I know it seems like a pretty radical move, but remember, the plane's not going to stop running. The magnetos will keep the plane running. You're not turning off the mags, you're just turning off the electronic red master switch. It'll kill your radios, it'll kill your lights and everything, but it'll also kill the electronic pitch trim motor and give you time to reset, find the circuit breaker, get everything back the way it should, turn the master back on, see if that did the trick, if you got the right circuit breaker, and go ahead and finish your flight. But you really need to know where that circuit breaker is because it will be quite a handful. I did have one once on a plane I was ferrying. It was on a 310. I believe it was in Arizona. It was a brief runaway pitch because the switch got stuck. I was trimming it up, got to where I wanted to, took my thumb off, kept going up, and luckily I was able to get it disengaged relatively quickly, but it was kind of scary when all of a sudden the plane's got an uncommanded pitch up, and you're like, man, it wouldn't have taken much if I wouldn't have been paying attention to get up to stall speed, or get down to stall speed. Anyway, let's go take a look at my Queen Air and see if I know where my circuit breaker is. All right, here we have the instrument panel for my 1960 Beech Queen Air. And right down there next to the yoke is my autopilot, which despite being 64 years old, still works perfectly. On the right side of that is the avionics master switch. And right there on the left side is the electric pitch trim circuit breaker. So if you have a runaway trim wheel, you first will see the big monster trim wheel spinning like crazy. And if that happens, you get on the yoke. First try to counteract it with the electric trim switch. If that doesn't work, big red button, push and hold. That should disable the electric trim. Then you can retrim manually with the knob, with the big wheel, and let it go and see if that solved it. If that doesn't, it's time to pull the circuit breaker, push the red button again, pull the circuit breaker, retrim, and continue the flight. I'm really glad that circuit breaker is right there, easily accessible, easy to find. But despite it being so easy to find, I still think I'm going to put a colored collar on it, probably red. That way I can easily find it and easily pull it. And I'm really glad Beech put it there and not way over there where the rest of my circuit breakers are, which are virtually impossible to see from the pilot seat in flight. All right. Hopefully that never happens. Okay, so after sitting down in the Queen Air just now and looking at the circuit breaker that controls the pitch trim motor, I realized that I wasn't 100% sure where it was when I got in here and started recording this video. That kind of bothered me. I hadn't thought about it in a while. I haven't flown the plane in 6 months. Okay. But I still should have known where that was. So I think even though it's right there, right in the middle of the panel, right next to the autopilot by itself, it's even got its own little light on there. I think I'm still going to put a collar on that just to remind me every time I see that's where that is. And if I have a runaway trim situation that I can't stop with either the pitch trim button on the yoke or the big red button on the yoke, that I know where that circuit breaker is. And Connor too, he's about to start flying the Queen Air pretty soon. Annual's almost done. We're just week and a half away. So he's going to be there, and that's one of the first things I'm going to show him. It's like, you have a electric trim problem, that's where it is. So that's where the circuit breaker is. All right. Yeah, and they're just $275 on Aircraft Spruce. I think I can afford that. So once again, though, I have no idea if the Debonair crash is due to runaway trim. That was just a wild guess, and just use that to start talking about the subject on this video, because it's something that I hadn't thought about it in a while and really wanted to revisit. But I guess we'll see what it is. It's a terrible time of year to lose some family members. My heart goes out to the family. It's a tough thing. Thanks for watching. Appreciate the support of the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and keep your speed up.